So I'll just say a little bit about that practice. So that right effort and right concentration, that's really what we're focusing on here. This is the nuts and bolts of what it means to get fucking enlightened. Like, if you want to be free from suffering, you need to understand the mind. And how do we do that? By refining our attention, by collecting the attention, by learning to stay here, and then building out from there, right? So what we've been talking about over the last few weeks, and really actually through the new year, I started to kind of go through the Eightfold Path, and I started to go through the Eightfold Path in utilizing the baskets. So the three groups of teachings that the Buddha gave, which then were laid out as each individual practice, right? And so the three, I like to just do the three. I like to keep things simple, like to go over through each eight. I mean, we could do that, each one individually, week by week for 8 weeks. And, I may end up doing that, but there's so many groups of teachings that I like to look at the groups. So the first basket, the first group of teachings known as Sila, or ethical integrity. And we spent several weeks, and then over New Year's, those of you who attended, we took precepts. We've gone over the precepts, this understanding of ahimsa, of non-harming, and really kind of a prerequisite to meditation, preparing your life to be able to sit with yourself without feeling so much of whatever that is, the low self-esteem, the self-worth, the guilt, the regret, the shame, all of the stuff that plagues our minds, which the Buddha called kilesa, which means the torments of mind. So one of the ways that we learn to do that, and the Buddha taught this, is to act in a way, like have some integrity, act in a way that is non-harming to ourselves, to others. And by doing that, what are we doing? We're reducing the amount of suffering that we're causing and that we're experiencing. And so that's kind of stage one. Actually, that's actually stage two. The first stage is, look, if you can't not be an asshole, just be generous. Just learn to be generous, be giving, dana, be kind to people, let people in when they're trying to get in traffic, like every once in a while, maybe every third time or something, right? And you'll never get across town if you let everyone in. I found that on my way here tonight, but I got here eventually. So this idea of generosity, and then sila, this idea of kind of how can I live in a way of like, how can I learn to contain my own suffering? Right? How can I learn to contain my own suffering so that I can actually get to know it, understand what is this cause of suffering? What are the ways in which I suffer? Instead of spilling it out on everyone else. And so when we're not acting in ways of ethical integrity, what that tends to mean is that we're spilling it out through gossip, through using substances, through stealing, through lying, through sexual misconduct. So there's these ways in which we're spilling out our suffering, the inability to contain. So learning to contain our own suffering and then reducing suffering. This is what we've been talking about the last few weeks. And it's not a perfection thing. It's do the best you can with the aim of getting to, the center, right? So there's this Zen metaphor about the bullseye. So in Zen, they use archery, they use kendo, they use, swords, and they use weapons, and it's all part of practice, right? Refining attention. There's actually even that the practice we were doing tonight is like sharpening the blade of a sword, refining our attention, perfecting the tool, right? So with the analogy of the ethical integrity, the idea is like there's a target, and the bullseye of that target is the precept, say non-harming or non-stealing right? Not taking that which is not offered. And what we're doing in our lives is we're honing our skill one arrow at a time, trying to hit that bullseye. And sometimes we can do it perfectly and we nail it right on and we can know what that feels like. And sometimes we're a little bit off. But that we're going to keep the effort, sustain the effort to work on reconnecting to what does ethical integrity mean to us. Okay. Step 2, or step 3 now because I gave an extra one, is what is known as Samadhi. So Samadhi has some different meanings. Sometimes they call it Samatha, Samadhi, but it basically means, or in the basket, if we're going to call it a basket, it's the basket of meditative techniques, okay? Instructions, calming the mind, refining the mind. And it basically is wise effort, training the mind to avoid unwholesome mental states and to develop wholesome mental states. Effort. I gave you the application of effort today. And then the second on the list is wise mindfulness, developing the power of attentiveness and awareness in regards to the 4 foundations of mindfulness: body, feeling, mind, and mental phenomena. So to me, that's a kind of a set that's actually not what I was wanting you to focus on. And it may have happened because we're conditioned. We almost always are talking about mindfulness in that way here. And we're usually going through those lists. But part of my training, particularly when I was going through monastic training and in Asia and doing this very ardent kind of steadfast sitting for all day, every day, and doing these kind of practices, it was very much about this particular refining the mind by wise effort and wise concentration, gaining samadhi, or a level of samadhi. So what is wise concentration? Well, cultivation of one-pointedness of mind. And this means the ability to really focus, right? To give our attention to one particular object and to sustain that attention for as long as possible. I say this just about every time I teach meditation. It's kind of my shtick, right? To aim the attention, connect with the experience, sustain that attention for as long as possible. And then forgive yourself when your mind wanders off, because it's gonna, and have some curiosity, some calm, some compassion as you redirect the attention back. Now, tonight I gave you just a little bit, I was just a little bit more focused, right? A little bit more like pick one point and go back there again and again and again. And this is a refining of our attention. And I gave you some specific instructions about curiosity, what's happening with the breath, what did you experience, what are you noticing, beginning, middle, end. Like these kinds of things are all about kind of aiming, in. What can we see? What can we see? What can we see? So hopefully that happened. And of course, the opposite may have happened, where your mind just went like, fuck that, and just thought about whatever you wanted, right? Or, got into some future planning, or you did whatever your normal practice was, or, whatever. Like perhaps that happened as well. And yeah, that happens. It's not a problem. It's just something to be aware of. Oh, wow, yeah. When I am given a specific instruction or a specific kind of technique, my mind wants to rebel, do whatever the hell it wants. When I first started doing this, that's exactly what I noticed. Yeah, my mind would just be like, "What? Focus on the breath. It's boring." It's just off on its own. All right, so I want to give a little teaching to kind of back some of this up from this guy named Siddhartha. Maybe you heard of him. This is from the Anguttara Nikaya, one of the groups of teachings. It's called Luminous is the Mind. Luminous is this mind, brightly shining, but it is colored by the attachments that visit it. This unlearned people do not really understand, and so do not cultivate the mind. Luminous is the mind, brightly shining, and it is free of the attachments that visit it. This the noble follower of the way, really understands. And so for them, there is cultivation of mind. So what is this saying? Luminous is the mind, brightly shining, but it's colored by the attachments it visited. In other words, the way in which we get barraged by past and future and insecurity and regret and remorse and should have done this, want to do that, and all this, what sometimes one of my teachers calls selfing, this layers and layers of self that is distracting us from the luminous mind. So one of the ways to talk about what is this second basket teaching us, what is the second basket of the, bhavana or meditative techniques, what's this for? Well, it's to cultivate the mind so that we can actually use it to our advantage, to gain the insights. And then the other thing about this is, I love this about the wise effort. This idea of wise effort, like continually coming back again and again and again, coming back to meditation, having the wise effort to sit every day, right? Listening to Dharma talks. This is the way that we avoid unwholesome. Apparently I'm getting a phone call. This is the way that we avoid the unwholesome, which there's actually, they're considered the 10 distractions, the 10 things that are, unskillful that the mind comes up with, right? Which I'll maybe focus on those another day. And then there's the shifting to the 10 wholesome or skillful actions or mental factors, right? This is called akusala and kusala. So unwholesome akusala and wholesome kusala. And so we want to kind of shift. And this happened, and I love that this is the case. This happened before the Buddha's enlightenment. So as the Buddha was like grinding away, this is the mind grinding through the hindrances, right? Which we're going to go over in a minute. He began to see, my mind goes this direction, and it leads to unskillful thoughts and feelings and stories, right? And then he began to kind of like earmark them. Oh, okay, when I notice that, I can just notice unskillful and come back. And then when he began to recognize, when he brings his attention on certain other, mind states and mental states, that they actually lead to wholesome or skillful results. So this is another way that we talk about, do we want our minds to be entangled in our story, in our suffering, or disentangled, right? And that's actually a better way. I like that better than all those other words, unwholesome, wholesome. I think that's kind of I've talked to you guys about my view of the scholarly British stuffy people that didn't really know about meditation. They were like, oh yeah, these are unwholesome, right? I don't necessarily find that. It's too religious for me. But I like skillful and unskillful way better, because that I can work with. I have been super unskillful. And even today, there was a moment, unskillful. And recognizing unskillful in the mind, or even in the action, before, during, or after is beneficial. And then learning to maybe shift, even in mid-sentence sometimes. I've been just fully lying. That's absolutely like bullshit. And been like, unskillful, yeah, that was a lie. And just said like, I just totally lied to you, And by doing that, it's beginning to shift. And so this is one of the ways I feel like wise effort, the continually coming back to practice, and not necessarily, like the Buddha wasn't like, just meditate on Sundays, He was like every moment, sitting, walking, lying down, bringing mindfulness in, adding times dedicated to practice. Learn to refine your mind, free your own mind, and it will work for you. Right? So what's the third basket? The third basket is panya, which means wisdom, right? The development, the cultivation of wisdom, which is the goal, right? So, if we have a goal, that's the goal. The goal is to awaken, muddle through the bullshit of the mind and our patterns and our habits of mind that are repetitively leading us back to cycles of suffering over and over and over and over and over again. And when we can begin to see it, unskillful. And then we can begin to shift, just like recognizing when the attention wanders off. Thinking. No big deal. Not harsh, not bad, not wrong, not your fault. And coming back here now, a little bit more refined, a little bit more curious, we can begin to kind of see what's happening there. So I'll talk a little bit more next week about specifically about wisdom and the cultivation and development of wisdom. I want to now shift my focus to another group of teachings, known as they're known as the 5 factors. Sometimes they're called the 5 powers. They're basically the tools you need in order to get there, right? And so I want to utilize I want to utilize an analogy. It's a story in the Buddha's teaching known as the ancient city. It's been talked about before. Noah kind of touches on it sometimes. So the idea, and so having traveled places in Asia and whatnot, I've come across like Angkor Wat. Anyone been to Angkor Wat? So, or Borobudur, another place, right? Or Bagan in Burma. There's these ancient cities. And I've been to all 3 of those places and have been blessed to have meditated and watched the sunrise and all these things about that. And it's just a place, but metaphorically, it's a place that was once a thriving center of a civilization that then over years and centuries, the forest took it back. And this happens to our own minds, right? We can be ardent and practice and go on a 7-day meditation retreat and we're like, oh, great, like feeling good. And then we get back and then it's like, or the holidays hit and we're like, I don't really need to meditate right now. Or you get sick, which is like something I was really feeling. There's sickness in my mind, in my body. I didn't really want to meditate, but actually I feel a lot better now that I have meditated, which is interesting. So this, the way that the centuries kind of overgrow these cities and they get covered and they get obscured, right? And the same thing with this luminous mind that the Buddha was talking about. It gets obscured and it gets covered over. And so what did the Buddha do? The Buddha found a path to this ancient city. To the ancient city that was within our own, to this luminous mind, to this heart that is filled with compassion and loving kindness as a natural resting place. And so these are the tools. So if you think about Indiana Jones or what's that called? Tomb Raider or something like that, right? You got to get to the temple, right? But how do you do that? Well, you got to go through the jungle. And there's brambles there's this old path, right? So the Buddha had this path and he found it and he had to cut away the skillful and unskillful vines and brambles and fallen trees for himself. And then as he began to teach others, they also were cutting back and clearing the trails and like allowing it to be, okay, more people can come here now, right? So using this as a metaphor. So we need some tools, right? So let's say we'll go into, whatever. Like we need some tools, right? And we have these tools. We already have them. So here's what they are. Confidence. We need to have confidence. So this is what's going to help us get through this arduous or ardent path, this difficult work. We need to have some confidence. What's confidence? Some people call it faith. I don't really like faith too much. I don't really like the word. It's got too much fire to it for people. And also, I think in this country, we have a connotation of this kind of blind faith or believing in something that you can't see, that doesn't exist necessarily. And so this idea of confidence or inspiration this is what's going to start us on the path. So for me, reading a book, seeing a friend, listening to meditation, finding, the teacher here, Noah Levine, I've known him since I was 16 years old. I watched him go from a deadbeat drug addict to this guy that was like being a little more kind, a little more gentle, a little more loving, a little more wise. I watched him for like a good 8 years, like really like a hawk, before I decided, all right, maybe I'll give this a try. He was an inspiration for me. He's one of the reasons I'm sitting here tonight. So, and reading Dharma Punks, that was an inspiration for me. And for you, maybe it was a podcast or Pema Chodron or, whoever, right? The Dalai Lama. The Dalai Lama was also a huge inspiration for me. I remember meeting the Dalai Lama in 1997 and being blown away, by the energy, by the exchange, by everything about this being, and I was like, all right, there's something to this. I'm going to figure it out. I haven't quite figured it out yet, but it started me along this path, right? And others, I've been inspired by other teachers. So for yourself, what has been your inspiration? And then from there, utilizing a couple different, this effort, utilizing the next tools, but this is what generally puts us on the path and perhaps sustains us on the path, right? Because effort doesn't just come once. Confidence doesn't just come once. And this is what I love about Buddhism. There's a few key teachings about Buddhism that keep me coming back. And I've been doing it for 2 decades. And I've never been kicked out, and I've never been, actually that's not totally true. I haven't been kicked out, but that's because they were the right wing folks, the conservative Buddhists, and I didn't fit with them anyway, so I was fine to not go. But the practice and the word or the teachings of the Buddha himself, never have I been let down by. So. Confidence is continually instilled through not only external, but actually then it becomes an internal. As I began to meditate, maybe like you, I began to apply the energy, which is the next of the factors that's needed. I began to apply the energy, showing up to these groups, dedicating some time to go on retreats, sitting a weekend and then a 5-day and then a 10-day and then 5 10 days and then, a month long and then going to Asia and, it just kind of grew and grew and grew. And the longer that I began to meditate and sustained meditation, the more confidence I had in this practice and its benefit. Absolutely. And don't believe a word I say, see for yourself, right? Which is what I love about Buddhism. That Buddhism says, don't believe with blind faith. Don't believe because I say so. Don't believe because it's written in books. Don't believe because it's 2,500 years old. Believe because you have experienced the verified faith of what the benefit of this meditation practice can be. That is the see for yourself, right? Okay, so confidence, or what we call faith or inspiration, effort. So once we have that, then we need to apply some effort. And then there's something else that happens, that there's this kind of transformation. Those of you who've been on a meditation retreat, maybe you've experienced this, where the first day or so, it's like we call it like going through the swamp. It's like muddy and like you're sleepy, and there's all these hindrances that come up, right? And these are coming up in our daily life, but they're not as exaggerated because we're so distracted all the time. And so when they start to come up after a day or so of sustained effort, of loving kindness, of compassion, of keeping going to the cushion, of doing walking meditation, what happens? There's this opening. There's all of a sudden energy. Like sometimes you don't actually need to sleep very much. The first 3 days you were exhausted and falling asleep on the cushion, right? Nodding like you were, coming on like you're on heroin or something, right? That's what it felt like for me. And then a couple days later, it's like you're on speed. Like you're like, whoa, like my mind is super clear. I got this totally figured out, you know? And the only thing that changed is sustained practice. That's it. And a little bit more time. And so this is what they call virya, right? Energy that's practice sustaining. And I can't really describe it. And it gets really, the longer you go on retreat, it does balance out, but it can get really intense. Like I would have some like wild dreams where I was fully mindful, lucid dreaming, stuff I never liked. I took tons of acid, mushrooms, way beyond that, you know? So anyway, so for those of you that are like looking for the hallucinogenic experience, it is possible with meditation, actually. I've experienced it a few times. So to balance this for these first two, because these are very motivating factors, right? We're bringing in mindful awareness. It's also a tool. It's a tool that we have if we have a mind. If you have a mind that works fairly well, you have the ability to be mindful. That's awesome. When you can go, oh, my attention has wandered off, and now I'm bringing it back. Guess what that's mindfulness. Right? And the sustaining is concentration. The ability to keep it focused on a particular, or aimed, I should say, connected with a particular, experience or target or, meditative. That's what we're calling concentration. And we really need both. And so this is where the Buddha taught both. That we need to be able to concentrate, to stay and cultivate attention, which is why we did something that maybe was a little uncomfortable or a little difficult tonight. Because we actually don't do that a lot here. And yet, if you want to go on retreat or you want to deepen your practice, it's necessary to do. And then from there, right, then we're also using mindfulness at the same time. So we're actually utilizing this, one pointed focused attention. And then we're utilizing this, I'm recognizing my attention wanders off and I bring it back as quickly as possible without a harsh kind of, like I used to punch myself in the brain, I'd be like, you idiot, like for 10 years. I had a very harsh practice because of the way I learned meditation, and that which was this concentrated, like focused, back to the breath, this really refining attention. And it gave me some good tools. And it also really didn't help me to be kinder, gentler, more open. It just was off. I was out of balance. And so by learning more mindfulness and then more of the metta and the heart practices and compassion, I began to kind of find that balance. But we need to have some ardency. And it's said all through the Buddhist teachings, we actually need to have this strong determination. It's necessary. Otherwise, we're just lackadaisical, right? Otherwise, it's really easy to just be like, I'll meditate tomorrow. Just like, I'll pay my bills tomorrow. Yeah, what happens if you don't pay your bills? Shit gets shut off, right? What happens if you don't meditate? Yeah, your brain just starts to go on autopilot again, So this idea of utilizing mindfulness and concentration, again, to balance, right? And then the fifth factor on this path is known as wisdom, is what we call panya. But it's really the thing about wisdom. I don't want to talk too much about it because it is both a gradual process and it's not a goal. Because if you think about what is wisdom is my view, knowledge and experience together. Right? I know lots of smart people who read thousands and thousands of books about Buddhism, but have no wisdom, but they can spout off all kinds of lists, and the Buddha said this, and this at this place, and Jedi Grove, and da-da-da. Yet, what's your practice like? What experience do you have with working with that practice, right? So this is my understanding of what the Buddha was really clear about, is we need to have the knowledge, the understanding, wise understanding, starting on the path. And then it needs to develop into wisdom as we progress. This is one of those things where it's like, look, words don't actually really do it justice. Like it's one of those practices that we just gotta kind of keep working with. Okay. 4 more minutes, and then I'm going to open up to the questions. I'm just going to go over, because here's the thing. These are 5 factors. You have them. Wisdom is in you already. It's just a matter of uncovering, right? Excavating, right? Moving away, refining the attention, refining the mind. This luminous mind is already within you. I guarantee it. I guarantee it. Money back guarantee. Or at least all your misery. So this idea of like, how do we really focus on this? How can we really begin to kind of work with this as a tool? Well, we have to see the things that get in the way, the obstacles on the path. And so I'm just going to kind of go over them briefly and then open up for some questions, and maybe I'll come back to them next week and we'll expand into wisdom. So the first, you guys know these. You've already experienced all of them. You've probably experienced multiple, right? They're known as the hindrances. They hinder us from freedom. They hinder us from practice, right? They're in the way. And so the first is wanting or craving, right? This idea of wanting or craving. So wanting or craving clouds our view of the present. You know, we start thinking of all the things that we miss or that we, that we don't have, that we want. We're craving things to be different than they are. So when this happens, we often get lost off on fantasy, right? Some kind of fantasy, or the opposite of some aversion, right? Which is another hindrance. Okay, I was on this meditation retreat. It was a 10-day retreat in the south of Thailand. And it was very simple. It was a jail cell. I was a cement bed, wooden pillow, like hardcore, right? The place is called Swan Moke. They have a 10-day meditation retreat in the beginning of every month. And so you're all welcome to attend. It costs 3,000 baht, which is like $100 for 10 days. Amazing, which is why I went. Every day, for 8 days, breakfast was rice gruel. This kind of rice, a little bit like cream of wheat with a little bit of soy sauce and some scallions or something. Every morning, that was it. That's what breakfast was. Okay. About 6 days in, I start thinking, I really would like to have some like bacon. I'd like to have some like pancakes, something else. Okay, maybe not bacon, but pancakes, right? Banana pancakes. Oh, I had some banana pancakes in Bangkok. They were super good. Got them right off the street. They were like, 30 cents. It was, I wish we could really have some pancakes. Lost, right, in some fantasy. And then guess what happened the next morning? I'm sitting in meditation. It's still dark out. The mosquitoes I'm having a loving kindness practice with the mosquitoes. And what's happening is that my mind starts to go, my nose starts to go, oh, I think I smell pancakes. And then I went in this whole thing about, they're actually going to make pancakes. They made pancakes. And so for the rest of that like 30-minute meditation between 6:30 and 7 a.m., I was like, pancakes. I'm about to go eat some pancakes. I'm so stoked. Just lost. You know what I mean? Just like wanting and craving. And I could sit in meditation because I've been doing that, but my mind was totally gone. So the bell rang. I jumped up, even though my legs were still asleep. I jumped up, right? And I'm like hobbling first in line to the pancakes. And I got there and I was like looking. And then guess what happened? Rice gruel. Yeah. And I started laughing out loud because I didn't mindfully walk, by the way. I was like limping, gimping, running. And then I was like just laughing at the mind. Oh my God. Yeah, of course this happens all the time to me. And I just was able to really see it clearly because I was so lost in this fantasy that had happened the night before that then popped up spontaneously in my mind. And this is what the Buddha called papancha. right? Or what we kind of call ADD sometimes, But really, it's papancha, this kind of repetitive, lost in a thought, lost in a fantasy of wanting or craving or satisfying some urge. And this is a hindrance, and it totally gets us away from what's actually happening in our experience. Now, mindfulness says, oh, and then that compassion, that loving kindness says, oh yeah, that's just the mind. And then the rest of my day, I wouldn't say it was perfect because it wasn't. I still wanted pancakes, but it wasn't in the forefront of my mind. And as soon as I got out of that retreat, I went and got some banana pancakes for sure. For sure. But this is wanting. This is craving. This is the allure. And we get sometimes we don't even notice because wanting and craving is pleasurable. And we like pleasurable, right? What we tend to notice is stuff like restlessness and agitation. We tend to notice stuff like aversion and anger because we don't like those. Those aren't good, right? Those are bad. So we want to get rid of those, right? So we're pushing that away. I don't want to be restless. I don't want to be anxious. I don't want to have agitation, right? These are also hindrances. They're also getting in the way. But so often it's this wanting, this kind of, I call it kind of the golem in my mind. The precious, that's what my mind goes to, not as much as it used to, So being able to see that and actually come back to the here and now, come back to the practice, be mindful of what the experience is in the mind, and then come back to the body. And, and get into the here and now and what is maybe, and even just saying, what is that really saying to me? And is it actually useful? Is there contentment in the getting? Have you ever gotten a new car, a new phone, a new whatever, and then there's anxiety, right? Because I don't want to break my phone. I just got this new phone, right? I waited, this is an 11. I waited, last one I had was a 7. I waited a really long time. Right? But whatever, it was just a phone, I didn't really care. But every once in a while, the new 10X would come out of it. Oh, look at that. But then, resting back. And then, and then finally, then there was the 11 Pro. But just because I'm kind of a weirdo, I didn't get the 11 Pro. I got the 11 because it's good enough. And that's a practice of renunciation maybe for me. I don't know. But there's this kind of, this leaning forward that can happen, this being carried away in the fantasy of having, then being okay or something. So this is what we call a hindrance, right? And there's the other hindrance of sleepiness. Maybe we'll have to get a little bit more into that. And then the biggest one I feel like that really affects us is doubt or disbelief. And so much doubt is really about not good enough, not worthy enough. Is this really going to be beneficial? Yeah, that teacher talked about it, or yeah, that monk has got, looks pretty awake to me or whatever. But is this really good? Is this really going to benefit me? And we need to doubt. What some of the classic ways of doubt is, why in the hell did I come on this meditation retreat, which I have thought on day 3 plenty of times. And then this I can't do this meditation. Meditation's not for me. I hear that a lot. Meditation's not for me. I'm just not, my mind's not built for it. No, that's not true at all. If you have a somewhat, coherent mind, you can do this. It's going to take some effort, but you can do it. So, and then also maybe this isn't the right thing for me. Or maybe next year, instead of going on that meditation retreat or going to that meditation group, I'll just go to Hawaii or something. These are some of the ways in which doubt creeps in. And it creeps in other ways too, not just during meditation, but we can really notice it during meditation. So each of those 5 factors play a role in extinguishing working with and diminishing, not really extinguishing completely, but diminishing what we call the hindrances. So we'll have to pick that up next week. We'll just kind of stop. And I realize sometimes I get on a rant and I just kind of am rambling and it feels like I'm trying to get a lot of information out. So hopefully it's coherent. And if you have any questions, anything you didn't understand or you're wondering about, feel free to ask. We have a few minutes. Please.
Can you just do a quick rundown of the 5 again?
The 5 what? Both of them? I'll do both.
Yeah, both the hindrances and the...
So the 5 powers, confidence, right? Effort or energy, mindfulness, concentration, wisdom. Okay, so that's the 5 factors that turn into powers. They're like our superpowers. And then the 5 hindrances are wanting or craving. Sometimes it's called desire, but that's not really a good translation. Aversion. So this kind of anger, aversion, pushing away. And then sleepiness, sloth, and torpor. And then restlessness or agitation, and then doubt. Okay, so those are and they work hand in hand with each other as we increase the 5 factors. We're actually decreasing the hindrances. And so they're working together in opposite ways, right? Maybe I'll focus more on that next week, but yeah, thanks. Other questions? So my suggestion for you this week is to maybe work with like setting some wise effort, and maybe it means sitting for 10 minutes longer, or maybe it means sitting for 10 minutes a day, doing something to increase your effort, to increase your energy, your dedication to your meditation practice, right? And if you want to really to use that refined mind technique, that kind of like sometimes it's called a tight focus. You just are really refining your attention into one little point. And it doesn't have to be the breath. It can be the body. It can be like scanning up and down the center of your body. It can be using sound, but it's better to use sound if it's one sustainable sound and not like just the rising and falling of different sounds. Although it's possible, but it's a little harder to do because it's always changing all the time, just like the breath too. But it just seems to be challenging. But do you want to try it? Try it. Doesn't really matter. Just do something, do something. Besides spacing out or being on Instagram, except for when you're coming to our class. Thoughts, questions?
You mentioned that you studied with some very conservative, you touched into a conservative way that you actually ended up walking away from, just given such hardcore things that you've done, obviously, in your journey. If you'd care to share what struck you as something that was too conservative for you.
Well, it really, I stepped away from teaching and from Buddhism for a couple reasons, for a period of time. One, just because of some of my own issues that I had to really work on to be a better teacher. And then 2, some of my defendedness, some of my unskillfulness. And then 2, there was the political system of who gets to be a teacher, and this kind of hierarchical structure that I found within the Buddhist, the greater, larger Vipassana community. I found it just off-putting to me. Yeah. So that was part of it. Yeah. It was kind of like 2 reasons, but I think I was talking specifically about kind of like the rigidity of Zen to me. Like I started off in a Zen practice years and years and years and years ago, and the rigidity of that practice to me just wasn't useful. There was too much cultural influence and not enough. Just not enough for me to feel comfortable. I believe the word discipline actually means a disciple unto oneself, which is what the Buddha is teaching. That's the kind of discipline to develop. And any kind of outward discipline, I've just never really gotten along with. People are trying to bend me to be what they think I should be. It's never really worked out for me or them. Yeah. So that would be my as skillful as possible way to answer that question. All right, so thank you so much for your time and attention. And let's just take a moment and let's just breathe it in. Yeah, just take a breath, acknowledging. There's this statement that hearing the Dharma is blessing supreme. Teaching the Dharma is blessing supreme. Being generous to those who are teaching the Dharma is blessing supreme. So just taking that in. All the goodness of this practice. May our practice, what we participated in tonight, may this practice, first, may we kind of soak it into our own hearts and minds and just acknowledge ourselves for the effort. And then giving it away with open hands as we go out through our life. May the benefit of this practice be dedicated to the freedom from suffering for all beings, not just for ourselves, but for all beings everywhere. May we all be free.